And that seems as good a point as any to turn off the music. Sometimes it works really, really well when that music kicks off, and sometimes I always kind of wonder just like how it's going to go. Evening all, as folk are filtering in. We'll just give it a minute before I hit the camera. People filtering their way in. Just have a quick swig of water as well. Interested to see how tonight's show goes, only because we don't have as much hockey to talk about. But then, at least I was thinking that this afternoon, and then I read the statement from Blackburn, which we're definitely going to talk about, by the way. And again, the clock on my phone doesn't match the one on my computer. It's really weird. One's 2 minutes ahead of the other one, which is really strange. Either way, let's hit that. Hey, there we go. As ever, we'll give folk a bit of a moment to get in. If you're watching on catch up, your magic word for this week. So, if you're watching on catch up, the thing we ask folk to do if you're watching on catch up is to go down into the comments, leave a comment. Comment on something that's happened on the show. But we ask you to stick in the magic word. The magic word is defending. For a bunch of different reasons this weekend. Oh boy. All things considered, defending. So there's your magic word. But yeah, on to the warm-up question as you're going as well. Biggest surprise from last weekend. Interested to hear people's thoughts. We're just going to quickly check as well that we've posted this in all the relevant places. As far as I'm aware, what's happening in the Sheffield Varsity? 1-1 at the end of the first period at the Sheffield Varsity between the University and Hallam. Folk are coming in. Yes, I ventured that that might be your answer, John, but we'll go on that. Thank you, Dave. Yes. Touche. Defending is for losers. But such is life on that front. Righty ho. Ooh, that's a very good point as well. There's only a week until the women get rocking and rolling with Worlds as well. Excellent. We'll give it another moment or two. Because that clock is still all over the shop. I don't think there's a way to alter it here now. No, we'll leave that. We will leave that for the time being, and I think we will get ourselves, he says, make sure he's not standing in the way of anything, we'll get ourselves rocking and rolling. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid and all beyond the binary, it is Wednesday night, it is 8 PM, and it is time once again for the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, here to take you through the weird, wonderful and wacky world of the National Ice Hockey League structure. Here in Great Britain, we focus on the National Division. That is our bread and butter. That is our home port. But of course, we take on absolutely anything and everything. From Leeds to Lee Valley, nobody gets left out. It means, of course, we look at the National Division as well as Division 1 and Division 2 in the north and in the south. Happy Wednesday evening, everybody. We are officially into the post-season. Playoffs has begun, and boy, did it begin. There's a few bits and pieces flying around all over the place at the moment. Crackers scorelines, goals galore, overtime shocks. Of course, we've probably got the biggest of all the shocks down in South 2. But plenty of hockey that's taken place over the last weekend, and a little bit of controversy as well. There's, of course, frustrations with scheduling in Division 1. There's games in Division 2 where there only one leg could be played, but there's teams through in Division 1 and Division 2 all on that road to Sheffield and the Steel City Showdown. We've had the first weekend of the National Division playoff round-robin groups as they look towards Coventry. We, of course, now know who's going to be playing in that Sunday afternoon game in Coventry in that National Division 1 Championship game, and the fact that tickets have gone on sale for clubs there as well. Plenty to be excited about over the next hour and a bit that we're going to chat about hockey. But of course, we do need to do a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. Banners on the wall at wordpress.com. One source for all things related to the NIHL. But of course, our Banners on the Road series, which follows my weird and wonderful winding journey through British hockey, we took a step away from the NIHL because Mugginty is back commentating for Guildford for the next couple of weeks. So I was back in the commentary box and got a front row seat to somebody's title challenge starting to slowly ebb away because I was in the commentary box for Guildford versus Nottingham this past Saturday evening. And yeah, the Panthers had a huge chance to really take a step towards their first Elite League title in over a decade, and they did not do that because Guildford outclassed them for the better part of that one bar, 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end. But we're not with my Banners on the Road series. If I'm in the commentary box, I do a sort of a little sub-series of that. It's called In the Box Thinking, so it's a slightly different bit of analysis, but also giving you the insight on what it's like to commentate on these games. So you can check that out. You can check out the Banners on the Road from our March excursion, where I went from Southampton to Bristol to accidentally ending up in Wrexham because something I was going to got cancelled, to ending up at Deeside versus Billingham, to then driving all the way home. There's a bunch of other games. Every game I go to gets a write-up. Sometimes I do like a little video instead, but it's mostly all of those bits. The other stuff, of course, you can check out is our Hockey Story series, where I sort of do long-form, in-depth pieces of writing. Sometimes I do interviews as well, where we kind of look at a topic in depth. I've spoken to the heads of NIHL DOPS. I've spoken to Steve Dangle. I've interviewed club owners in this country like Steve Nell. Matty Davies, of course, is the coach of Hull. I've interviewed coaches. I've interviewed players. I've done pieces on stuff like hockey content creation, for example. Shout out Andrew Rocher if he's watching somewhere. But and of course, Oddman Rush Hayden now is back on the scene, having spoken to him a little while ago. He sort of disappeared and is now back, having finished some of the stuff he was doing in Canada. But essentially, those are the two main series that we do over on the website. But you can also check out the back catalogue of the old BOTW podcast, and you can check out our free-to-download tabletop game, Dice Hockey. All of that is there. 14 years worth of stuff to check out over on bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. The other thing, of course, is it's Wednesday night, and there aren't that many Wednesday nights left of the 24-25 National Ice Hockey League season, but whilst that's still running, we will be here Wednesday evening, bringing you all the action from the weekend before, all the analysis, all the news, all the views, and going through absolutely everything and every game that's played across the NIHL, and we probably touch on the Elite League, and Andrew Day is here as well, so I know we're going to end up going through the scores from the WNIHL as well. You can get a little bit of everything here on Wednesday nights at 8 PM on the BOTW YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, share the video, and the great bit, of course, is I know quite a few people will be here on catch up, and hello to you lot. You've already had your magic word for the evening. But if you do join us live, you get the benefit of the chat, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings. As we're talking our way through everything, you guys can get involved as well. Stick something in the chat. All we ask is that if you are going to use the chat, please remember the golden rule here at BOTW, and that is DBAD. Don't be a dick. Be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings, and we are all going to have a jolly good time. So where to start, I think, is probably the interesting bit, because there's a few bits and pieces going on. Of course, we've seen Cam Huff re-signed for Peterborough. That was obviously briefly talked about that last week. A few bits and pieces still going on. We are, of course, 1 week away. So around this time next Wednesday evening will be the start of Great Britain women's campaign in World's Division 1B. They'll be taking on Latvia in a week's time. Of course, they will be they'll be up. I believe they're at Dumfries, aren't they? So just double checking GB women. Next Wednesday, the 9th of April against Latvia. Thursday, the 10th of April against Korea. Saturday, the 12th against Kazakhstan. Sunday, the 13th against Slovenia. And Tuesday, the 15th of April against Italy. So we are not a million miles away. Obviously, so close to qualifying for the next round of Olympic qualifiers, but are narrowly losing out. GB now on home ice get the opportunity to make a statement in the women's game by trying to get themselves promoted to Division 1, by getting themselves promoted up from Division 1B. And of course, we are now a week and a half away from the Steel City Showdown, 2.5 weeks away from Coventry, from the Coventry weekend and the National Division Final Four. Plenty of exciting things going on, of course. Do remember, of course, John, who I think is still lurking in the chat somewhere, won our raffle, so he's got 2 tickets to go to the Steel City Showdown in Sheffield. Of course, tickets are still available for that. Tickets are still available as well for Coventry. And the one thing I would say, and I'm not saying this on behalf of England Ice Hockey or anything like that, of course I do bits and pieces with them. We announced the blooming National Division All-Star teams last week, but I'm not saying this because of them. But I want to say this at the beginning here, because I know people will be on the fence about going or not going. And I will say this. If you cannot justify spending the money, please don't spend the money and go if you don't think you can afford to do so. It's absolutely fine. Please do not feel you need to be guilty. People will feel, sort of say, oh, but it's so much fun and it's all this, that and the other. You do you. You are no less of a hockey fan if you don't go. You are no more than a hockey fan if you do. If you don't think you can justify the spend and can't justify going to yourself, do not go. It's as simple as that. Like, things are costing more money. The bills are going up. Food is going up. Drink is going up. All these things are happening. And I get it. And you might think that you're gonna have a bit of FOMO. And maybe you do miss out on something. But this is all meant to be fun. And you shouldn't be spending money that you don't think you have just for the sake of it. Like, if you can't justify it to yourself, it's totally cool. If you can go and you think you can afford it, I would strongly recommend that you go if you can. Because these are always fantastic weekends. Coventry in particular is always a brilliant weekend. It has been for as long as I've been going, since I've been going for over a decade, bits and pieces now. Never went to the Elite League playoffs because at the time I was a poor student when the Bison were at that point, and I was starting out in the world, and I couldn't afford to go. I couldn't justify spending that money, but as I got older, I was able to justify it, and I could go, and it's cool. Like, it's really, really good fun. Get a chance to interact and have fun with fans from all the other different teams. And I know in some of the lower levels that's been a bit of an anathema, been a bit of an odd thing. That's something that the Elite League do and that the EPL did and now the National League do. Like, if you're thinking about going up to Sheffield and you've got the opportunity to, I can't go. Family reasons will keep me away from Sheffield. But if you've got the opportunity to go, you should definitely go. And it will be a really, really fun time. And maybe your team isn't there, but then you get to watch a lot of really high intensity, high quality hockey. And you get to be there where the action happens right at the business end of the season. If you get the opportunity to go to Coventry, well, we know that the National Division is a fantastic hockey product, and we know that you're going to get 4 games of real import. You're going to get 2 cracking semi-finals on the Saturday. You're going to get Slough versus Billingham on the Sunday, which I am so excited for. And then you get the final game of the NIHL season, the National Division playoff final, and the curtain coming down on the British hockey season right then and there. But like I said, I just want to kind of put that out there. Everyone is sort of talking about, oh, you got to go, it's got to be excellent. You definitely should go if you can, and it definitely will be excellent. But please don't think that by not going, you're not any more or less of a fan than anybody else. You do you. You look after you. We'll be here on Wednesday nights to come and chat to you if that's how it kind of rolls for you. So you guys make sure that you're doing all right. The other big bit of news, and of course we will talk about it in a bit, is this statement that has come out of Blackburn regarding the scheduling. What we will do with that is we will go through the National Division, and when we get to Division 1, that is when we will talk about Blackburn, because it needs talking about, and I venture there's some people will have some pretty strong opinions thereof, but we will talk about Blackburn when we hit the Division 1 scheduling and we start talking about the semi-finals of Division 1 North next week. All right, just because I want to kind of crack on and let's do the National Division when we're talking about the National Division. Now of course there are a few teams that have finished their campaigns, namely Bristol, namely the Bees, and namely Solway. Now, of course, we know that Struentonner's testimonial is coming up in Solway. That's going to be a really, really fantastic evening as well. What we will have had out of the Bees, of course, the Bees have already held their end of season awards. So we will just very, very quickly dash through the awards that have come out of the Bees. So forward of the season for the Bees went to Will Stead. Defenceman of the Year went to Stuart Mogg. Ty Cathcart picked up the most improved player. Players player went to Dan Rose. Unsung hero of the team went to team manager Steve Merry. And if you've ever been to Coventry Playoff Weekend, you know Steve Merry. He's going to be press ganged into dancing whether he likes it or not. Club ambassador for 24-25 went to Chris Callahan of Blue Line Photography. Chris is amazing. I'm sure he's going to be dashing around at Coventry as well. Coach's player of the season, unsurprisingly, went to Max Wright because he was the second team NIHL All-Star superb player that he's been all year. Best British player went to Will Stead, which is not unreasonable given he had one of his most productive goal-scoring seasons of his life. Inspirational player of the season went to Ty Cathcart, which, again, fair play. I think Ty Cathcart is in the running for most improved player of the entire national division. And the player of the season, I don't necessarily know the metrics for what that constitutes, but player of the season for the Bees went to Max Wright. And to be honest, I don't think anybody's going to argue with that one for the Bees, because Max Wright was utterly ridiculous this season. Whether he will be back next season remains to be seen. The conversation of import netminders is something I think we will pick up in the summer and have a look at when that time comes, because of course the season is not done yet, albeit that 2 of the 3 import netminders, of course, are already out. Hayden Levine, the last one standing so far. Either way, what we will do, so I will click this button here, and we will have a look at the first weekend of the playoffs in the NIHL National Division. And, well, we knew with a high goal-scoring team like Hull and a team that likes to shut things down like Peterborough, we knew this one was probably going to go one way or the other. It was either going to be a complete Wild West shootout, or it was going to end up being incredibly tight and tense. And it was incredibly tight and tense. 2-1 to the Seahawks at the end of the first period. Johnny Corneal and Lee Bonner with a no-look shot with the goals for Hull. And Tom Norton's goal making it 2-1 at the end of the first period. A scoreless second before Emil Svek making it 3-1 just before the death. And a late goal from Yanni Larkiner making it 3-2. But with only 7 seconds left, the Phantoms ran out of road, and Hull with an important regulation time win over the Phantoms in Game 1 between those two sides. Down at the Link Centre, cats and dogs loving an old fight, and this was a frustrating one to start with for the Wildcats, but probably even more frustrating if you're the Dogs. The Sheffield Steel Dogs 2-0 up by the halfway mark, 2 goals from Jonathan Phillips, having Sheffield's 2-0 to the good. Swindon pulled 1 back in the second period, a power play goal from Aaron Nell, and then 3 goals in the third, turning the game around. Tomasz Malazinski scored 47 seconds into the final frame, and then late goals, second of the night from Nell and a second of the night from Malazinski, who both turn up on the big stage when they were needed. And Swindon get themselves a 2-point Saturday night to start off their post-season campaign. In the other group then, Telford, who of course ran the table, looked dead and buried in January in terms of even making the postseason, then went on a fantastic run where they managed to claw Solway back within distance, overtook them, and then on the last weekend beating Swindon in overtime on the last Saturday of the regular season to make it into the postseason. And they run Leeds close, but they are relentless again. The Knights win it in overtime, so Telford pick up a point, a crucial point, to start the season in another tense and tight game. Leeds, though, 2-0 up at the end of the first period. John Buesa and Kieran Brown on the power play, having the Knights 2-0 to the good before 2 goals in the second period from the Tigers, from Danny Rose and Joe Aston, tying the game up. Leeds do lead at the end of the second period, though, thanks to Ollie Endicott, but a late goal in the third period from Harry Ferguson gets the Tigers on the board points-wise and takes them to overtime. But who else could it be? The newly minted member of Pete Russell's GB squad, Kieran Brown, in overtime. Brown from Bissonnette, from Matt Hayward, of course. Matt Hayward on the last miles of his career, as he will retire when the season concludes. And the Knights head out of Shropshire, having given the Tigers a point, but having kept 2 for themselves. And if you think top playoff hockey is meant to be all tense and tight and difficult, these two sides decided to say, sod that. Why defend when you cannot defend? Oh my word, what is this nonsense? MK beat Romford in overtime again, but MK had scored 7 goals by the 32-10 mark and ended up in overtime. What is this nonsense? MK were 4-0 up after 11:25 before Romford started clawing their way back into it. And ultimately, what have MK managed to do here? Because they've given Romford a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Max Stewart, Patrick Forsberg, Sean Norris, Harry Gulliver, Patrick Forsberg, Ross Venus and Tom's Rutkis in regulation for the Lightning, he says. Quickly doing that before his throat goes funny. Sean Miller, Sean Barry, Reid Morrison with a hat-trick, as well as goals from Jake Sylvester and Andrew Schufel, has it at 7 apiece, and then in OT, because MK always do it in OT, Sean Norris from Jordan County from Patrick Forsberg for the game winner with 90 seconds to play means that MK sneak out another win in extra innings. Heading into Sunday then, and well, the Dogs got close, but not close enough. It's maximum on the weekend for the Swindon Wildcats, and a 0-point weekend for the Steel Dogs. The Cats though, nearly falling foul of the trick that Sheffield did the night before. The Cats ahead early, 3-0 up by the end of the first period. It becomes 3-2 before the game-winning goal ending up being scored at 27:39. That late goal, as we can see on the power play for the Dogs, making it tense towards the end, but not enough there. And Aaron Nell's side start. We get the perfect start to the playoffs. Walker Summer, Elmeri Helfors and Ivan Björkley Nordstrom for the Dogs. 2 goals from Glenn Billing, 1 from Jake Bricknell, and that game-winning goal at 27:39 from Balint Pakodzi means the Cats are 4 points from 4. This game was not as close as the night before, as we can clearly see, as the Knights take Telford back home and blow the Tigers clean away. A pretty heavy final period as well there, with 4 goals in the final frame. At which point it was already 5-2. Matt Barron ending up with a hat trick on the night goals as well for Matt Howlett, Noah McMullen, Jordan Buaso with 2. Finn Braden on the scoreboard as well for the Knights as they get a comfortable win in regulation. The Tigers' goals coming from Eric Henderson and David Thompson, because who else would they be in that kind of a situation? And then MK and Romford decided that again, sod defence, why defend, don't know what we're doing, out the window it goes. MK racing into a 2-0 lead, eventually pegged back to 2-2, and this game just went back and forth, but eventually MK being MK just pulled themselves away, and Harry Gulliver ending up with a hat-trick. Not a popular man at times in Romford because of of some of his perceived antics, but a very, very productive night from him. Goals as well coming from Max Stewart, Sean Norris, Harry Gulliver, for Dylan Lawrence and Patrick Forsberg. Sean Miller with 2, TJ Anderson with 2, and Tommy Huggett with the goals for the Raiders. And then the last game of the weekend sees the reverse. It was Hull sneaking the points at home, but Peterborough avenge that loss on Saturday night, and they take even spoils of the weekend between the two sides. Yanni Larkin, 2 from Nathan Salem. A first goal at home for the Phantoms from Richard Hartman. Luke Ferrara and Austin Mitchell-King for the Peterborough Phantoms. Alex Kent with an absolute gorgeous goal to start things off for the Seahawks, and Owen Bruton getting on the board. But ultimately, Peterborough and Hull need to settle for 2 points apiece. So as we look very briefly then at the tables from the National Division. So Group A as it stands, and a perfect start for the Leeds Knights, who are unsurprisingly top of the table. 13 goals out of 2 games thanks to that very lopsided Sunday victory, puts them in a prime position. Peterborough sit over Hull because of goal difference over the 2 games, and Telford are not out of the fight, of course, having a point out of Saturday night's encounter, but are going to need some big results this upcoming weekend to stay in the contest. And then in Group B, well, goal difference puts the Lightning above the Wildcats, but of course it was a 4-point weekend for both sides. Don't worry, we're going to get into that one in a minute. Romford's point on Saturday, having scored 12 goals in 2 games and only ending up with 1 point, think Adam Laysham's been left scratching his head slightly. But that 1 point keeps Romford within touching distance. The Steel Dogs, of course, 0 points on the weekend, and therefore find themselves currently bottom of the table. Which takes us then into the fixtures this weekend, and a huge one in that second half of Group B. Must win, do or die for the Sheffield Steel Dogs this Friday night at Ice Sheffield. 7:30 p.m. face-off as they face the Romford Raiders. If the Dogs lose in regulation, that is pretty much their post-season done before it even begins. And for Romford, it puts some pressure on the teams above them. Into Saturday then, just the 3 games because of Friday night's encounter, and of course that big other game in Group B, the MK Lightning and the Swindon Wildcats at the Thunderdome, which could have huge connotations depending on what's happened the night before. In Group A, Leeds take on Hull at the Castle, and Telford take on Peterborough. And then in Sunday, like I say, because a lot of these things are basically just home and homes the entire time, Hull will take on Leeds, looking to repeat their win from the last day of the regular season. Peterborough take on Telford. Swindon welcome MK back to the Link Centre, and Romford and Sheffield will reconvene at the Sapphire after their encounter on Friday night. Just having a look there in the chat. Brain fades after brain fades after brain fades on Saturday. Headley didn't have his best night. Credit to Romford over the weekend for never giving up. However, at no point MKL were behind over the weekend. So the lucky jersey worn at every playoff game we attended is back, and Sunday proved lucky again. I mean, fair enough. You can't argue with it. If it as people know, regular watchers will know, I don't believe in luck. So if it works, it works, and I ain't going to argue with people finding their way to do whatever they do. And of course that was the big one of the big talking points, was Jordan Headley being pulled on Saturday night, Will Curlin playing out the rest of Saturday and then playing on Sunday as well. Interesting to see what Tim Wallace does. I did make the prediction that Tim Wallace would eventually sit himself in favour of his other imports, which he didn't do over the course of the weekend. So I'm really interested to see how he approaches the rest of the postseason if potentially Jordan Headley has hit a wall in terms of performance, and Will Curlin needs to start. Because let's face it, if we're talking about, if you look at you think of those games, Saturday night at home for MK against Swindon, and then Sunday at the Link Centre, that Saturday becomes huge for MK. Because if MK can win in regulation, they've got wiggle room on the Sunday. And we know at times, and we saw what happened to MK in the Cup against Romford, when the pressure is on sometimes, MK can crack, and sometimes they will come through and find a way to nick it in overtime, as we've seen time and time again this season. What Milton Keynes Lightning do we get on Saturday? Because if they win on Saturday in regulation, then it gives them wiggle room. Ultimately, I think they need to beat Swindon in regulation. I think if they win in overtime and give Swindon a point heading back home, then you're giving Swindon kind of a little bit of what they want. Swindon will be looking at this weekend and thinking to themselves, 4 points is attainable, is attainable and would be brilliant. 3 points would be great. But if you let Swindon come out of this weekend with 2 points, you're potentially looking at Swindon finding a way, if you don't get the roll of the dice that you want on the final weekend, to lose out on that first seed. And that's the thing MK are going to want to do. They're going to want to be first seeds. They're going to want to get every advantage they can, particularly if they make it back to Coventry, because they will want home advantage and last change in that semi-final, knowing that they're potentially staring down the barrel of the second seed, which, if we're honest with ourselves, is going to be one of Peterborough or Hull, and that is not going to be, and they're not going to want to have to do. They're not going to want to have to be, trying to line match without last change against either of those two sides, because Hull are definitely not the sort of team. Whilst MK have done well against them, I think in a one-off game, Hull are not a team you want to play, and Peterborough are Peterborough. It's the only way to describe that. So there's a lot to be kind of said there. But I think as well, if we just skip back through the graphics, that this one now on Friday night between the Dogs and the Raiders becomes massive for both sides. If the Dogs get 1 point, it's not 100% over, but it becomes a very tough mountain to climb. If the Dogs lose in regulation at home to Romford, the way back to qualifying for Coventry is incredibly tough and is well out of their hands at that point, because then they're effectively needing Romford to get 4 points out of out of the final weekend against Swindon. And let's not get this wrong. Remember the playoffs last year where Romford won in Swindon against the Wildcats. They can 100% do this, but it's starting. But like I say, if Sheffield don't win this game, the road back for them is really, really hard. In some ways, actually, this game going to overtime on penalty shots doesn't really benefit either side. Both need to kind of win in regulation, particularly then, because of course if you head into the Sunday. Oh, wrong way. I'm pressing the wrong buttons. There we go. That way. Because then if you think about that one, there's a potential here for one of Romford or Sheffield to end up with a 0-point weekend. And if one of those two teams ends up with 0 points, they are done. That is it for them in terms of the playoffs heading into the final weekend. Would have been nice to have our captain and defender after being banned for instigator and third man in. I mean, those are the issues, and we knew they were coming on that front. The other thing is, if MK win on Saturday, the massive pressure on Swindon if Romford get a 4-point weekend. Swindon don't want to go to final game at the Sapphire. Absolutely not. But I think as well that I personally can see this weekend from an MK and Swindon perspective as ending up being a 3 each. Because I am fascinated to see what Swindon do in the playoffs with this particular roster. I'm going to swap back actually because I'm still on the graphics here. Let's put myself back on the full screen. So MK and Swindon, between the two of them, and I don't think it's unfair to say from Group B, there are two favourites to make it to Coventry, if we're 100% honest. I know it's the lazy bit of analysis to say, well, the two highest placed seeds are going through. However, Sheffield's inconsistencies across the year, as I've said before, and Romford, who fight with a ton of emotion and a ton of heart, you will not find a team that is more energetic and more emotion driven than the Romford Raiders. But let's be honest here, in terms of the overall hockey quality, there's two teams in Group B that are better than the other two. So expecting MK and Swindon to make it through is not unreasonable. For me, I don't think that MK are as much better than Swindon as some of the fan bases on either side think they are, and I don't think Swindon are that much better than MK as some of their fans think they are. I can 100% see this weekend being 3 points each or a 3 and a 2 split, where one team wins, where both teams win away and drop points at home, because of the nature of the way both teams play. The thing I am interested to see, because we've seen MK a bit more in the crunch, we've seen them in the cup, and we've seen them in those kind of games like against Romford and like we did against Leeds, where Swindon have not fared as well in those big games, because they were in the title race and then got walloped and dropped away. The thing I'm interested to see in a playoff context is Bricknell, is Wells, and is the overall Swindon defence and Marr. Because that Sheffield team is good rather than great over the balance of the season. Whereas, whether we like it or not, it's a really good MK team that sometimes struggles to put all the pieces together right at the death. That's why they've not won the league title and why Leeds have gotten past them. It's why they didn't beat Romford in the cup. Because right at those crucial moments, MK break down and guys try to do too much by themselves. Swindon, when things don't go well, just repeat the same pattern and expect a different result. So what I'm interested to see is, when both faced with the adversity, where does that go? And the thing I'm really interested to see is Wells in a playoff format, Bricknell in a playoff format. Rennie Marr some people said Rennie Marr was unlucky not to make the All-Star teams. I think being 100% honest, I think he was probably third on that goalie list across the year. I think he had a better year than Jordan Headley. I think he's had a better year than Will Curlin. I think he's had a better year than Hayden Levine. I think he's had a better year than all of the goalies at Sheffield. But I don't think Rennie Marr's had as good a season as Max Wright, and I think statistically that's borne out too. But what I'm interested to see is, with this different, with some different personnel in front of him in a really big crucial situation, because MK are the second seed for a reason. What does Rennie do here? Because he did not have a great year last year, was okay the year before that, and I think this has been the best Rennie Marr for the last couple of years. And ultimately, if Jordan Headley's having a wobble, I don't think Will Curlin's as good a netminder as Jordan Headley or Rennie Marr. where do we go from here? You've got that MK defence with Forsberg, with Spadafore, who, you know, for the many criticisms you can have of Jordan Spadafore, he's not as terrible as people seem to think he is. So you got Malik Martelli, who for me justifiably was in the All-Star teams as well. Ben Solder's had a very, very good year, and maybe a lot of people have sort of put that emphasis on MK not scoring enough at times, but actually their D has been okay, and it takes 5 men on the ice to defend, but their defensive, the back end's not bad for MK by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm just interested to see how Swindon do, because MK have kind of had this pressure and we've seen them do well in it and we've seen them fall in it, whereas I'm interested to see what Swindon do in this pressure moment now. Does Bricknell show up? We saw Malazinski and Nell, who've had slightly quieter years by comparison for the two of them, really sharp in that game against Sheffield. What do they do against MK? What about Glenn Billing, who I've said before and I think a lot of people have said is one of the most underrated British forwards in the league? What about Balan Pakodzi? What about Ryan Wells? Because this is the big game for Swindon to put up or shut up if they want to make it back to Coventry. What's Jamie said there? The last 2 double weekend splits between MK and Swindon ended in a 3-2 advantage to MK this season. That's true. And it wouldn't surprise me if it ended up 3-2 one way or the other. But like I said, I think the groups have treated MK and Swindon kindly in that sense. In group, if we go back to Group A, he says, just quickly going back to the graphics. If we go back to Group A, because in some ways this is where we will see the interesting kind of sort of parting of the ways, because you would expect in a moment like this is where Peterborough could do a Peterborough against Telford and will slaver them out of existence, and will leave them, we'll leave Peterborough maybe on 5, maybe even 6 points by the end of the weekend, and Telford on 1, possibly 2, needing a miracle to go through on the last weekend. Leeds and Hull, though, becomes interesting because Hull need to get a result somewhere. 2 points as an absolute minimum for the Seahawks this weekend in terms of being able to qualify. If they can get something out of Leeds, and you have to think that this game here on the Sunday at home at the world's most versatile arena is the place where that needs to happen. You can kind of take a mulligan going to the Castle, going to Ellen Road and playing Leeds there, because it's the league champions at home. It'd be great if you can get a result and you go playing for the result, but you do need to kind of do that little bit of mental math. And I see that Jamie's put in the chat about Bobby Chamberlain being banned for an extra game because of not counting and Bobby having tips over the dots bits and pieces. But there's a bit of mental math in there. And even MK will have done this. Sure, they'll have turned up at Leeds wanting to win, playing to win, trying everything they can to win. But you can't tell me that any club has gone into Ellen Road this season thinking, well, that's 2 points. This isn't Div 1. This isn't Div 1 and this isn't Billingham, right? So teams will look at Leeds games thinking, if we get a point, great. If we get 2 points, fantastic. But no one's banking on 2 points. Hull at home on Sunday is must win for Matty Davies and the Hull Seahawks. And I'd said, I think Hull will win the playoffs. And I did, because I wasn't anticipating Bobby having a complete blowout in the last weekend. But also as well because Matty's built a team that's made for playoff hockey. Yeah, they didn't have a good week. They didn't have a good Sunday in Peterborough. And I'm really fascinated to see what happens on Saturday night as well. But for me, season-defining moment for Hull comes Sunday. Because Hull, if they can get a win on Sunday against Leeds at home, they can get 2 cracks at Telford, the bottom seed, knowing that they get Bobby Chamberlain back on the last night. So Hull need something. Hull cannot have a 0-point weekend this weekend. I think we're all pretty set on the fact that the Leeds Knights, the defending league champions and the cup winners, are heading back to the Sky Dome next weekend. And they are on for the Grand Slam. And I'll say it because, again, I don't believe in luck. But Leeds are on for the Grand Slam. And the crazy thing about it is, this isn't even the most dominant Knights side that we've seen over the last couple of years. And they could come out with all the trophies, which is crazy to think of. But yeah, in terms of that one, Peterborough are just going to do a Peterborough. They're going to quietly go about their business. Telford, I'm interested to see what they can get out of this weekend. Telford have been a bogey team though for Hull. Playoffs, different mentality, hugely different mentality. And of course the question for Telford is, yeah, they ran Leeds really, really close, but have they run so hard just to even make it here? When does the gas tank end up being empty if you're Tom Watkins' side? So many great threads on it. Like I say, the big games are Friday night in Sheffield and Sunday night in Hull for me. Sure, we can have Telford and so MK and Swindon are going to have a knockdown drag out war for 120 minutes this weekend, and in terms of the quality of hockey, it's going to be amazing. But in terms of that pinpointing bit of where the fulcrum points come in both groups as to who's going to end up going through, that's where it's going to be, because ultimately Sheffield have a 0 point weekend. They are done and they are out before they even start, before they've even really got going. So plenty of things to have there. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything anybody wants to chuck in the chat, please do so. Plenty to talk about from that first weekend. I'm going to make sure I've got the statement I want up, as I'm also just double checking just making sure there are some bits and pieces. Now, it's interestingly a statement that's come out from the D-Side Dragons. Interesting. This has just come out from D-Side. This came out 21 minutes ago as we were talking. It's live on the Dragons website now. The D-Side Dragons wish to address a matter concerning player eligibility in the second leg of our playoff quarter-final match against the Hull Jets. On Tuesday, the 1st of April, we were contacted by England Ice Hockey regarding the eligibility of a player selected for that fixture. Following a thorough internal review, we regretfully acknowledge that an administrative oversight occurred in relation to the selection. Upon identifying the error, we immediately notified England Ice Hockey and have taken full responsibility. The D-Side Dragons remain firmly committed to upholding the integrity of the sport and complying fully with all eligibility regulations. We would like to clarify that the player in question, while named in the lineup, did not take to the ice and had no impact on the outcome of the game. We recognise the importance of strict compliance in competitive play and fully understand the potential implications of such errors. Measures are being implemented to strengthen our internal processes and ensure this does not happen again. In line with Rule 35 of the Rules and Regulations, and in the absence of an objection from the Hull Jets, it has been mutually agreed that the D-Side Dragons will continue in the competition and can prepare for the next playoff match. England Ice Hockey issued the following statement. Quote, "This kind of transparency and accountability reflects the values we want to see across the league. In circumstances like these, common sense must prevail. The efforts of the players should not be overshadowed by an administrative error, and we must ensure that our actions remain fair and proportionate. This is about supporting one another as clubs, learning from honest mistakes and continuing to raise standards together while upholding the integrity of the game." The Hull Jets also shared their perspective. So this is from the Jets supposedly, and quote, "Following the conclusion of the review, we believe the error is a genuine mistake. While the player in question was listed on the team sheet, they did not have any material impact on the outcome of the game. Both sides played hard, and the playoff series was fiercely contested and played in the right spirit. D-Side earned their spot in the semi-finals on the ice. As such, we do not object to the decision by England Ice Hockey. Good luck to all teams competing in the Final Four. We sincerely apologise for any confusion or concern caused and are grateful for the continued support of our fans, partners and the wider ice hockey community. We will await any confirmation from England Ice Hockey of any potential consequences relating to team officials. Finally, we would like to extend our sincere thanks to England Ice Hockey and the Hull Jets for working together amicably to resolve this issue. We appreciate their professionalism, leadership and sportsmanship throughout this process. Your collaboration has contributed positively to the culture we are all striving to build across the league." And that is signed off. The media contact there is listed as Sean Bebbington, who is the general manager of the D-Side Dragons. So that statement coming out about 25 minutes ago now from D-Side. So interesting, and I can hear every Swindon Wildcats fan from the 2017-2018 season throwing kittens, or having kittens, sorry, and throwing a bit of a fit. Fascinating there that D-Side have realised their issue, gone to the league by the looks of it, and have realised what they've done. Now, that's going to cause a little bit of an interesting discussion, because where do we stand on this? Because for those of you who do not remember the 2017-2018 season, no national division at that point, and IHL 1 was the second tier as the EPL had collapsed and the teams from the EPL had joined their respective regional bits and pieces. Swindon listed a player on the game sheet in their playoff semi-final against the Peterborough Phantoms, and they were forfeited and given a 5-0 defeat from their Saturday night game, having beaten Peterborough. The game was 5-0 because they had a player on the team sheet who sat on the bench and did not play a shift. And then Swindon had the game overturned. Peterborough won that game 5-0. Swindon won the second leg, but not by enough. And Peterborough ended up going on to the Southern final, which they lost to Basingstoke, and ended up at the Coventry weekend where they lost to Telford. So Peterborough ended up making Coventry, having lost 4 games in a row, which is really interesting. And now, the better part of sort of 8 years later, a team has done exactly the same thing, but England Ice Hockey are okay with it, and the other team are okay with it. That's not going to sit well with some people. Now, I think D-side deserve a lot of credit if they're the ones that realise what they've done and they've gone to the league and gone, hang on a second, we've stuffed up here, what do we need to do? What's happening now? Would be fascinated to hear Billingham's thoughts on this, because of course they are now due to be D-side's opponents. We'll obviously talk about that in a minute when we get to Division 1, and there's other news as well out of Division 1. I can imagine this is going to be quite a bit of a headache for some. The other issue, of course, is this has obviously come out. What will come out in other places, I think, will be the discussion, because if this happens more than once, there's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. And what happens if an ineligible player plays? What constitutes a material impact? Because fair enough, you can almost, if you want to rectify yourself to it, and let's draw that line under here, because Hull have said it's fine and the EIH have said it's fine as well. So let's just for a second, for the sake of argument, just leave that where it is, right? What constitutes a material impact? Is icing a shift material impact? Is an assist material impact? Is a goal, I assume, is material impact? But where's the line? It reminds me as well, of course, from the 2023 North 1 Cup final, where Sean Galloway was forced to leave the ice about 50 minutes into the game because somebody had inadvertently crossed out the name below his on the game sheet, and because the line had straggled across his name, he was told this was after he was 2+1 in the game, that he needed to leave the ice because he was ineligible because he'd been crossed off the game sheet. Fortunately, common sense prevailed again in that one, because Solway looked at it and just went, well, why would he... Firstly, he's not ineligible, and he was on the ice, and he's played the entire season. This is really silly. And everything carried on the next night. And if you don't know what happened in the 2023 North 1 Cup final, go find Stuart Kerr and ask him. But but not ideal. Not ideal. And of course, the big question now is, everyone's going to be frantically checking their bits and pieces. Who's played at the weekend who maybe shouldn't have played at the weekend? We wait to see what else has happened. But I think we should say, fair play Hull. If they're happy for that to proceed as it was, and they've been fully consulted in it, that's absolutely fine. Fair play to D-side for speaking up and going, we've made a mistake, we need to hold our hands up. Can we go through the process of what we do here, please? So, interesting to see. Of course, that's happened after the Billingham Stars have done their Starcast, because as if they didn't need more to talk about on there if they're going to talk about me reviewing a Palmo this week. Questions, comments. What do we think? What do we think to that one? Because that is a crazy one. All things considered. Deary me. Is there any other news? He says, desperately slamming through, trying to find something. Nothing else I can see at the moment, thankfully. Boy, crazy. Nice of them to put that out as well, slap bang in the middle of the show, so we can all talk about it, which is great. So what do we think of that one? Should D-side be allowed to continue? Should Hull be let back in? Are we happy that both sides have kind of worked out what they're doing? What do we think? You can stick that one in the chat. As we will now move on to Division 1. And yeah, well, there it is. They're first on the sheet. our D-side and Hull from Saturday. So this, of course, was the Saturday. Of course, all the first legs from all of the quarterfinal ties. So we'll do it by day because, of course, these fantastic box scores produced by Joe Scutts over at NIHL Stats, NIHLstats.wordpress.com. Of course, Joe produces these for all of the four sort of conferences across Division 1 and Division 2. But it was Saturday at the world's most versatile arena. The nice early face of 12:30, and you could have watched this one on YouTube as well, which was really good. But a good start for the Hull Jets in this one. The Jets were pegged back in the first period, 3-1 down at one point before eventually pulling themselves back into getting themselves back into contention. Late goal from the Dragons did make it 6-4 before 9 seconds later Richard Hagar managed to get the Jets a 7th goal of the night. Goals for the Jets in this one: 2 from Boris Gibber, 2 from Ethan Daintiff, and as we mentioned, Richard Hagar with 1, Kieran Beach and Davids Uranox. Goals on Saturday from the Dragons: 2 for Jake Witkowski, 1 for Brody Jessen, and 1 for Ross Kennedy. And then Blackburn and Nottingham decided again, defending. Why bother defending? Blackburn 4-1 up before by the 28th minute. Nottingham fighting their way back into it, but ultimately the Hawks just that little bit too strong in this one, finishing up with a 9-5 win on Saturday. Lions goals coming from Alish Padley, Regan Kidd, Luke Birchnell, Alex Rushby and Toby Fisher. Goals for the Hawks: 2 for Liam Charnock, 2 for Petter Valisiak, 2 for Andy McKinney, as well as goals from Adam Barnes, James Royds and Jacob Lutwich in this one. A 45 save night from Isaac Ballantyre, and Ben Keddy making 49 saves himself. Got shots galore as both teams combined for 108 shots in 60 minutes. Elsewhere on Saturday, it's been a tough year for the Whitley Warriors. Inconsistency, injury, suspension, a very long suspension if you're Dean Holland, and then on what turned out to be the final game of the season at Hillheads, shut out in comprehensive style by the Solihull Barons. The Warriors outshot 52-37 on home ice. Corey Goodison with 2, Alex White with 2, and Nicholas Otterson, because of course he did, and Otterson ending up with 3 assists on 5 goals, because that's what he likes to do. But a comprehensive win for the Midlands side, and a 37 shot shutout for Graham Laverick. The league champion Billingham Stars then headed down to the Castle at Ellen Road on Saturday night, and well, it was close at the end of the first period, and after that it wasn't close at all. 5-0 at the end of the second period, and the Billingham Stars getting to double figures by the end themselves. The lone goal for the Knights in this one coming from Danny Harrison, as the Knights managed 22 shots compared to Billingham's 67. Goals in this one for the Stars: 2 from Ian Brown, 2 from Roland's Gritans, and then goals from James Moss, Joe Walls, Conor McNulty, Michael Elder, Callum Wilkinson, and Lucas Dowdall. Mark Turnbull and Jack Wakefield both getting a little bit of time. Wakefield getting the last sort of 8 minutes or so. Luca Tassadri makes 57 saves on 67 shots as he gets the full 60 minutes there. But then, well, what now appears to be the mark of some controversy, as the D-side Dragons took it all the way. Hull and D-side went all the way into overtime, but eventually it is the Dragons who roar last. They having lost the first leg by 3 goals. They win the second leg. They get it to overtime and then score that all important game winner. The game went back and forth as well. It was 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, and then D-side in the final period just managed to find a way. They chipped away. A last minute goal from Brody Jessen takes the game to overtime, and then on the power play, who else but Jake Witkowski to set up Ross Kennedy for the game winner, that now, in spite of what it seems like an ineligible player on the game sheet, has taken D-side into the playoff semi-finals. Goals for the Jets in this one from Mark Florence, Richard Hagar and Ian Kerman. The goals for the Dragons coming 2 from Gary Simpson, 2 from Ross Kennedy, including that game winner. Brody Jessen, as we mentioned, with 1. Jakob Hayek with 1, and James Parsons with the other goal there. Matt Croyle facing the facing the shots, 27 from 30 for him, and a 38 save performance from Zach Brown, as ultimately the Jets are knocked out. By D-side. And well, it wasn't much of a surprise, but Billingham at the Forum, well, they put another double-figure bunch on the Knights, 12-4. We knew it was going to be here, 22-5, a final aggregate score here. This is despite Leeds leading through Owen Dell. Dell actually ending up with a hat trick in this game, scoring 3 of the 4 goals on the night. Aaron Jordan getting the other one for the Knights in this one. But the Stars at home just absolutely giving no call to 8-3 up by the start of the third period, before Ian Brown scoring a natural hat trick in the third period. Has 8 goals in 2 playoff games. He is an absolute machine at this level. So as we mentioned, goals for the Knights. A hat-trick for Owen Dell and one for Aaron Jordan. 6 goals on the night in this one from Ian Brown. Oh dear. Lucas Dowdle, Callum Wilkinson, Sean Galloway, Conor McNulty and Chris Sykes with a 1-goal, 4-point note for him. And then James Moss with the other goal there. Both Mark Turnbull and Jack Wakefield getting back into the net. Jack Wakefield getting the entire third period in this one. Luca Tasantri faces 47 shots through 40 minutes before James Adamson gets the gift of the final period of the season for the Knights, who in their first season it's been pretty up and down at times, but they managed to claw their way into the postseason right at the end. And congratulations to them on persevering through their first season, to Davy Lawrence and his team. And while it was always going to be a mountain to climb for Whitley, having lost 5-0 at home, but Solihull just hold them at bay. 8-4 the final score at Hobbsmoat Road on Sunday, and a 13-4 aggregate victory for Solihull. So they've eased their way through into the playoff semi-finals. The Warriors to get 2 goals from Jamie Ord and 2 from Phil Edgar. 4 goals on the night for Nicholas Otterson for the Barons, 2 for Charlie Webb, 1 for Corey Goodison and 1 for Dan Mulcahy. A 3-point night as well for Zach Yokoyama. And then the Hawks and the Lions, it was always going to be a bit of a crazy one after the last one, but 16 goals on the weekend, and the Hawks win 7-3 at home against the Lions to end Nottingham's season. A pretty interesting year for the Lions. It was tough at times. Sorry, 16-8. As we can see there from that one, but a better year, I think, for Nottingham, and some of those young players getting the opportunity to do some really big things. Alex Rushby, of course, being the big name, having made the All-Star teams there as well. But Blackburn just too strong in the end on this one. Goals for the Hawks: 2 from Josh Crawley, 2 from Adam Barnes, and goals as well for Petr Valsiak, Lee Pollitt and James Royds. The goals for the Lions in their final game of the campaign: 1 from Alish Padlake, 1 from Ewan Woodward, and 1, as we mentioned, from Alex Rushby. So what that means, and this is where things start getting a little bit controversial again. My dark horse is still alive, yes. Will be a bit of pill to Swindon fans, but common sense has prevailed, says Ben, in terms of the stuff with D-side and with Hull. Now, as we can see here, the fixtures are there announced for this upcoming weekend, and you will notice that Blackburn are at home on the Saturday. Now, of course, they put out a statement saying that they were not pleased about this and this was an issue to be solved. There has been a statement come out from the Hawks in the last couple of hours that's on the Blackburn Hawks Facebook, which says from the Hawks as follows: This weekend, games against Solihull Barons in the playoff semi-final will take place as follows. On Saturday, the Hawks will be at home, and on Sunday will be at Hobbsmoat Road, Solihull, at a face-off time to be advised, and it says 5:30 here, as Joe has it. We have not agreed to this change easily or comfortably. We thought our finishing second would give us the opportunity to be at home this coming Sunday. We recognise that we informed everyone last week that we would be at home on Sunday, and people will no doubt have arranged their lives around the original home dates announcement. But both Planet Ice and the EIH gave us no choice in this. It was either switch the away and home fixtures, or we would have to decide on withdrawing from the competition, with all the potential penalties that both Planet Ice and the EIH would no doubt place upon us. We did speak to the Barons about the best way to try and achieve what our league position suggested we should have, i.e. the opportunity to choose which day to play. Unfortunately, they were unable to assist in this. The regular method of how home and away legs of this competition have been previously dealt with, i.e. the higher placed team at the end of the league season getting the choice of which day to play the game on, was made clear to us by EIH would not apply, and no help will be given in trying to achieve that. So we have therefore been forced into having to play away in the second leg, which is both a severe financial detriment to us and equally importantly, our supporters, the last game of the season being at home, which would allow our supporters to show their appreciation of the team in the nest. We had already informed our supporters that this game, that was due against Solihull Barons on Sunday, would be half price for both adults and children. We have further decided that due to the game having to be rearranged to the Saturday at such short notice, this will now be free of charge to all supporters who wish to attend. So whichever team you support, if you want to fix a playoff hockey, come and join us on Saturday evening. We thank all the supporters for their understanding and hope that all who attend both games will have an enjoyable time at both venues. Further game and coach details will be online shortly. Now, that feels a little bit like breaking your foot and then deciding to smack yourself in the knee with a sledgehammer because you're angry about breaking your foot. It's an interesting. I mean, fair play to the Hawks if that's what they want to do, and they want to give away free hockey. I don't necessarily think that doing it is. I mean, they complain there about the financial detriment, but then also talk about the fact that they're going to let everybody in for free. So from having had some money, albeit less, they're now having no money at all, which is a choice. It is a bit of a strange one. Now, the Hawks have a right to be aggrieved here because historically, we know what the situation is with this. You're the highest seed, you get the right of choice. Now, obviously, circumstances will dictate how that happens. So, for example, we know, and we'll talk about some of the games in Division 2, where teams in higher leagues had ice time, which meant that some games have had to be played as one-offs, albeit one of those games was probably the best thing. And so that can obviously dictate. But the whole point is that you should have the right, and that is a historic precedent. So what is happening in Solihull to make this not happen, and reportedly it is a birthday party being held in the Rink Bar, which to me should not predicate a hockey game being able to be played there, has left us with a situation where Blackburn are firing off statements, are seemingly contradicting themselves, and contradicting themselves to the point where it's like, this is a financial detriment that we have to play on a Saturday when we told everyone playing on a Sunday. So therefore, we will take no money from anybody. Doesn't really make sense. 100%. Maybe I'm missing something. Like they're saying it's a goodwill gesture. Well, here's the thing. If people were going to turn up and watch it anyway, they were going to pay. And yeah, there's a frustration if you say, we're playing on Sunday. No, I'm really sorry, we've got to play on the Saturday instead. And the reasons for that don't change as being a frustration. And like I say, Blackburn have the right to be a bit aggrieved here. But you still kind of need to make a rational decision and be aggrieved. These two things are not contradicting of each other. You can do both of those things together. And I don't quite get it. And if somebody from Blackburn would like to explain it to me, and they're literally just doing this out of the kindness of their hearts, then knock yourself out. If I'm Blackburn, maybe stick a bucket in a corner somewhere. So if somebody wants to chuck you a tenner for everything the club's given them this year, maybe do that. But it does feel a little bit like cutting off, we're making this grandiose gesture. Well, a couple of lines before you said this was causing you a problem. So why are you doing both? Doesn't really make a great deal of sense. But hey, if you want to go get free hockey on Saturday, go to Blackburn, apparently. So what is listed at the moment is it will be 6 p.m. on Saturday in Blackburn for them in Solihull. They will meet at 5:30 at Holsmont Road is what we have so far. Of course, do check bits and pieces from the Hawks and the Barons to confirm that. The other semi-final, which has its own controversy now as well, will be 5:15 p.m. at the D-Side Leisure Centre on Saturday between the Dragons and the Stars. They will then about face and meet at 5:30 p.m. at the Forum. Of course, if we just have a quick look there at the playoff table, we know that the two winners of those two games will meet themselves on Saturday, the 12th of April, for the Steel City Showdown. Ooh, started a bit further up than I thought. Into South 1, and it was the age-old battle on what am I doing there? Buttons. Stop pressing buttons, Anthony. This is typical PI bull. PI shouldn't arrange any outside events in the 3 weeks during the playoffs. It's as simple as that. However, PI just don't get it. The response from Planet Ice, Jamie, will be that hockey is part of their business, not all of their business, and if somebody wants to book something, then it is their prerogative to accept that booking. And ultimately, I don't get why Solihull can't play a game just because someone else is using the bar. Like, I don't get that. Like, yes, it's nice to have the bar open, but you can do one of these things without the other, surely. Maybe that's just me. Romford and Chelmsford meeting in their playoff quarter final, and it was a tight and tense one on Saturday at the Sapphire, but the Chelmsford Chieftains did get their noses in front. A late goal from Yuri Huska keeping the Buccaneers within punching distance as they scored at opposite ends of the game, with Donald Campbell getting the goal early in the first. But then it was all in the second period from the Chieftains. Cam Bartlett, Dylan Dix, Sasha Maltsev and Ollie Baldock with the goals in this one for that one. As the Buccaneers lost, Nils Maskelans at the end of the second period, he was given a misconduct penalty and thrown out of the game on that one. Max van Mullen making 22 saves to Jordan Alday making 28 at the other end. On the high road, well, Streatham chose to go first, but again, mostly just because as much as you can choose, because Swindon were at home. Swindon were at home on the Wildcats National Division team were of course at home. Were at home later on the Sunday, so they didn't really have a choice there. So on the Saturday, so Streatham had to do that one. But a comfortable win in the end, a tough one, and it's been a pretty decent season. That's a pretty solid Swindon Wildcats side, all things considered. And apparently Harvey Stead has scored for Swindon in that one, but he definitely didn't. He definitely scored for Streatham. Ethan Lane, Danny Ungoldsby and Luke Brittle, the other goal scorers there. Jan Costal Senior from Jan Costal Junior on the power play. That's pretty awesome to see. But the Red Hawks managed to ease their way past the Wildcats in the first leg. And then down in Gillingham, well, an absolute nightmare of a start for Kenneth Parish and the Dynamo. Shut out at home in the playoffs by the Solent Devils. Jack Hops in the first period and then goals in the third from Alex Murray and Kane Russell meant that Solent had the massive advantage going into the second leg, outshooting the Dynamos on home ice, and a 37-shot shutout for Aaron Taylor. Down in Cardiff Bay, well, the Cardiff Fire had made things difficult for the Slough Jets on the previous weekend as the season ended, but Slough eventually did get over the line and won the South 1 title, which meant that they met again in Cardiff Bay in the late face-off, and Slough Jets showed absolutely no mercy. A natural hat-trick from Jack Goodchild, as well as goals from Connor Redmond, Christian Moore, Ed Cave Humphrey and Ollie Hemmings-Marr doing the business. A 7-0 win and a 14-shot shutout for Nate Gregory, who gets the start in the playoffs. Another 40 saves for Ben Scanlon. And then on Sunday, it was within Solent's grasp, and they'd beaten Invicta in the last two playoff quarter-finals. But Invicta finally get their way, racing out of the gate. But a scoreless first period gave way to plenty of goals. Solent clawed themselves back into it and were still technically ahead in the tie after Alex Murray scored with about 8 minutes and change to go. But the Dynamos turned it back around and eventually goes to overtime. And well, it was said it was who I was told it wasn't actually them in the end, but it's Richard Harris who ties the game up late to send it into overtime. And Harris is the hero of the hour, and the Invicta Dynamos win in overtime, knock out the higher seed, and they earn themselves a trip back to the playoff semi-finals for the first time. Goals for the Devils from Kane Russell, Alex Murray and Liam Coleman on the night. For the Dynamos, Ruskin Springer-Hughes, James Laming, Tom Saw, and then 2 goals from Richard Harris to save the day, and 2 as well from Aaron Connolly, a man that you would trust with your life in a playoff situation. The bigger news out of Invicta was an injury to Brad Windibank, seeing Nikolai Dival, the young netminder, getting the full 121 minutes across the weekend, and comes out of it with a playoff victory. Invicta have the honour of facing Slough. All things considered, I think we're pretty confident after winning 7-0 the night before they'd make it through. And again, Cardiff causing a little bit of an issue in the at the Hangar. There's only 4-2 goals from Lewis Stevens and Aaron Reagan, keeping the Fire within touching distance. But ultimately, Seb Moore, Dylan Halicka, Lewis English and Ben Ely Newman doing more than enough. An 11-2 aggregate win for the league champion to outshoot Cardiff by 51-18 in this one. Matt Smittle does see action in this one, making 16 saves off of 18. And Ben Scanlon faces another ridiculous amount. He faces another 47 saves, meaning he faced over 80 shots. Made over 80 saves across the entirety of the weekend. Chelmsford managed to ease their way past Romford 4-2 on Saturday night, 6-2 on Sunday for the 10-4 win in a game that ended quite tempestuously, all things considered. Chelmsford 5-0 up by the 34:06 mark. Ollie Baldock, Sasha Maltsev, Grant Bartlett, Matt Lawday and Liam Chong with the goals for the Chieftains. Callum Burnett got the Buccaneers on the ball before a second of the playoffs from Cam Bartlett made it 6-1. A late goal from Nico Pascal making it 6-2. And as we can see there, there were certainly some moments at the end of the second period as well. Dylan Dix thrown out for fighting, which could be problematic for him, and Sonny Phillips getting a game misconduct for trying to fight anyone and everybody for reasons unbeknownst to anybody there. Both Max Van Mullen getting the third period after Sonny Phillips was thrown out. Jordan Lawday makes 31 stops. And Streatham, while having lost out on the league title, they made a point of pressing through and shoving the Swindon Wildcats firmly out of the way and ending their season. It was 2-2 at one point in this game, heading into the third period, before 6 unanswered goals in the third showed why Streatham are definitely not to be trifled with when it comes to this sort of thing, because that will be a side that is hurting and a side that is wanting to make a point. A 5-goal night at the Link Centre from Danny Ingoldsby, and goals for Ziggy Beasley, Ethan Lane and Harvey Stead. The last goals of the Swindon Wildcats campaign come from Ben Nethersell and Jan Kostel Sr. And the last game of what we understand from Brett Massey, we understand potentially calling time. It certainly will not be, from my understanding, not playing next year. Makes 56 saves, which is a hell of a way to go out if that's the end. But what that means is that this is what the semi-finals look like, and it is the big one in one side of the draw. Second seed plays third. One of Chelmsford or Streatham will not make the Steel City Showdown. They meet at the Riverside on Saturday at 5:30 and on the High Road on Sunday at 5:45. And then, well, Invicta finally make it past Solent, but can they cause the biggest of all upsets and knock out the Slough Jets? 5:45 at Gillingham on Saturday, 5:45 at the Hangar on Sunday. Good old AC missed that. Yeah, Jordan Lawday as well, actually retiring. I will say this when it comes to Jordan Lawday retiring, he is definitely retiring. It's not a going away and coming back later job. If you are heading to Sheffield, keep your eye on the programme when it comes to Jordan Lawday. That is all I will say on that front. But yes, Jordan is retiring. He is taking up a career opportunity overseas, and Jordan's a top lad. He's a really, really nice guy. And having spoken to him recently, he's making a decision for him and his family, and fair play to him. 26 feels like a horrible age to retire from anything, but yeah, ultimately Jordan's making the best decision for what he thinks. Jordan and his other half are making the best decision for their son. More power to him, and I hope he really enjoys the new life he's attempting to build for himself. Into the North then, and North 2. Last year's the defending playoff champions made easy work on Saturday at the 4, and the Billingham Buccaneers put the Kingston Sharks firmly through the sushi maker as they win by 11 goals to 1. That lone goal from Kingston was the first goal of the night. Actually, they were 1-0 up after 3 minutes and 2 seconds before Billingham decided that they definitely were not mucking around with this one and put an 11 spot on the Sharks. That lone goal coming from Liam Grant inside the first few minutes with a short bench Kingston side. 2 goals for James McCabe, 2 for Tom Fraser, 2 for Sam Dow, 2 for Jamie Patterson, and then goals from Ethan McLaughlin, Lewis Hall, and the veteran Stephen Wallace. As Billingham ease their way to a first leg victory. Meanwhile, the league champs, they also had themselves a pretty comfortable night, all things considered. 8-0 up by the 46th minute, and before a late goal from Aidan Dancer ruined the shutout for the Telford Tigers 2. Ultimately, Sheffield sneaking through at the last minute. It was always going to be an uphill battle for them, but they are very, very handily put to one side. 2 goals for Taylor Stanton, 2 for Dan Mitchell, and then goals from Josh Hustwick, Callum Griffin, Kyle Watt, and of course, Vladimir Luka getting on the board. Hal Griffiths coming in for the third period, and he gets his combined shutout with Matt Byrne ruined in the last few moments. Nathaniel Bell makes 41 saves. And the last game on Saturday, because we'll get to it in a bit, the Coventry Blaze took a narrow 4-3 lead over the Altrincham Aces after their 4-3 win in the Sky Dome. Dan Kent with that game-winning goal inside the last 3 minutes. Other goals for the Blaze coming, 2 from Ollie Dixon and 1 from Ollie Harris. Goals for the Aces coming from Carl Price getting 2 and 1 for Billy King. And then into Sunday, well, Kingston managed to beat Billingham, but definitely not by enough. A 3-2 win for the Sharks as their season concludes. They lose by 13 goals to 4 on aggregate. Kieran, with the Buccaneers 2-1 up heading into the last couple of minutes. Ellis Martin and Kieran Robinson add to Liam Grant's goal as they came from 2-0 down to win this one. And a nice way for the Sharks to end their season. But ultimately, Abby McCourt and Simon Geldar, I mean, the Buccaneers were already well out of sight, and whilst they lose the second leg, the Sharks get to leave smiling as the Buccaneers will move on to the semi-final. The Aces, they needed a result, and in fact had to play this one over in Widnes due to ice time availability, so a home away from home sort of. But ultimately, the Coventry Blaze are the ones moving on. They win by 3 goals to 1 in West Altrincham and win by an aggregate score of 7-4. Ollie Harris, Tom Brooks Smith and Connor Mellett with the goals in this one for the Blaze. Jason Burgess with the last goal of the season for the Aces, who've put out an advert. Should you wish to be the new head coach of the Altrincham Aces, you can apply to the club. And Telford, well, they were already pretty comfortably through, but then decided to make an example out of the Sheffield Titans, and they win by 12 goals to 1. It's a 20-2 aggregate score. Lewis Swaffield with the lone goal for the Titans at the death in this one. Hat-trick on the night from Vladimir Luka and 6 points for him. 4 goals and 7 points for Ollie Hunt as Paul Davis, Callum Griffin, Ben Washburn, Dan Mitchell and Taylor Stanton get the other goals here. Matt Byrne facing 23 shots and conceding 1. Both Hayden Oates and Nathaniel Bell coming in this game for the Titans, whose season concludes there. And then, due to ice time, there was only one leg, and it was a one-off game between the Sutton Sting, of course, runners-up in the Cup and runners-up in the league, as they look to try and get back to the playoffs. They lost in the final last year to Billingham, and immediately get themselves off on a good start. Even though it was just a one-off game, they put the Nottingham Lions firmly out of the way. 9-0 the Sting win as they move on in pretty comfortable fashion, and a 16-shot shutout that was split between Lewis King and Jack Hargreaves. The goals in this one: 2 for Morgan Glasby, 2 for Ryan Aspley. Goals as well from Adam Brooks Smith, Sam Colton, Cam Glasby, Joe Colton with a 5-point night and a goal as well from Elliot Meadows. So what that means is we get a repeat of last year's playoff final, this time over 2 legs. The Billingham Buccaneers will host the Sutton Sting on Saturday night at the Forum. That's a 6:30 face-off before a 4:45 face-off at Ice Sheffield on the Sunday. The Coventry Blaze have the unenviable task of taking on the Telford Tigers too in something of a local derby. They will meet at the Sky Dome at 6:30 p.m. this Saturday before meeting in Shropshire against the Tigers at 6 p.m. Hope he enjoys the 51st US state. No. The United States is the 11th Canadian province, Dave. That's how that works. Trump is a chump. In South 2, the league champs got a bit of a tougher test than I think they thought they were possibly going to get from the Chelmsford Warriors. Scoreless through nearly 35 minutes, but 2 goals in the space of 3 minutes from Sol Studley gave the Phoenix a 2-0 lead before a late goal from George Beckett kept the 8th seeded Chelmsford Warriors within a puncher's chance, which is something that I think that many people would not have expected come the end of Saturday for Chelmsford to be quite so close. Alexei Kolklov with 54 saves on the night, a pretty impressive performance from the young Chelmsford netminder. At Alexandra Palace, it was a much more even game as the Cardiff Canucks headed to the other capital to take on the Haringey Huskies. Harringay 2-0 up in this one. Ben Beldercost and Stuart Appleby scoring 2 goals in the space of 19 seconds in the first period to have them 2-0 to the good. But then some veteran presence turns it around for the Canucks. Victor Langseth and Max Babrea making it 2-2 in the second period before Jaden Ford scored to make it 3-2 at the end of the second period. A late goal from Courtney Grant ties the game at 3-3 and made it tightly poised heading back to the Vindico and Cardiff Bay on Sunday evening. Harry Thomas making 64 saves. At the Ox Pens, the Rising Stars. Well, the rule of banners on the wall, as we know from a couple of years ago, you don't run off the Invicta Mustangs, and the Mustangs were the ones who were leading in this game and let up a late goal. But the Mustangs win it by 5-4 at the Ox Pens to have to give themselves that early advantage. The Rising Stars out shooting the Mustangs by 46-37. Goals for the Rising Stars in this one from Ed Crotty, James Elridge, Joe Edwards and Kieran Wilson. The Mustangs goals coming from Anthony Baskerville, Callum Evans, Luke Thurkettle, Jake Stedman and Jarvis Mewett. Pretty shot-rich performance on both sides. 42 saves from Kieran Wyatt and 32 saves from Charlie Hanley in the Rising Stars goal. And the last game on Saturday was a one-off. And I think we're all kind of thankful it was a bit of a one-off. Because what would you do with the second leg of this game? Ice time availability, meaning that Peterborough and Solent could only meet on Saturday. And Peterborough, who won the League Cup and won the Eddie Joseph Memorial Cup, making a massive, massive statement. They're making an example out of the Solent Junior Devils that they want the playoffs, having fallen short last year as well. 22-0 in one game. All the more crazy. It was 13-0 after 40 minutes. And only 4-0 heading into the second. Solent sent into the postseason, sent into the off season in dramatic fashion, 82-17, as we can see there. Both Vinny Graziano and Callum Leader combining for the shutout. Leader facing only one shot on goal in the third period. Both Cooper Ivey and Joe Nolan facing a bevy of shots in that one. In fact, the netminders swapping around as they both face shots in that last one. A frustrating night for the Solent Junior Devils in this one. So let's run, if we can, through the goals. 5 goals for Nathan Long, 4 for AJ Herring, 3 for Dan Martin, 2 for Connor Pollard, 2 for Nathan Pollard, and then goals as well from Sam Barlow, Jordan Liddell, Rob McDonald, Taylor Romeo, Ross Clark, and James Pentecost. Callum Leader got an assist. Vinny Graziano got an assist. Matt Seville, Lewis Byrne, Kenny Bavin are the only 3 players to not register a point. All 3 of them play on defence. But yes, what a ridiculous game to have in the playoffs. And while Saturday night was close at the Riverside, it was not close on Sunday at the Spectrum. The Guildford Phoenix smashed the Warriors to one side and win by an aggregate score of 11-2, 9-1 in the end at 9-1 in the end at the Spectrum. It was 1-1 for a period. Jacob Rondo-Smith cancelled out by James Howson before the Phoenix went crazy and decided that they decided to have enough of being kind in this one. Hat-trick for Scott Bailey on the night. He goes 3+1. Teo Saya goes 1+3. Sol Studley, Josh Sherrington, Josh Abbott, Ollie Dennis, and as we mentioned, Jacob Rondo-Smith himself having a 4-point night. Both Jack Garner and Jake Studley getting some action in net, as did Alexei Kolklov and Luke Conley for the Warriors. And then, well, they lost out at home, but the Oxford Rising Stars do the damage on the road in Gillingham. And whilst you can't write off, as you can't write off the Invicta Mustangs, but unfortunately the Rising Stars have put the Invicta Mustangs out of the playoffs. A 6-3 win on the night. The Rising Stars overturned the deficit and put themselves through into the next round of the playoffs. They outshoot the Mustangs by 54-27 on the night to do the business. Mustangs goals coming 2 from Anthony Baskerville and 1 from Sam Oliver. Mike Willock with 2, Chris Beckett with 2, Kieran Wilson and Jeff Sikora doing the business behind a 24 save game from Kayla Poole between the pipes for the Kayla Poole for the night, and an empty net goal, of course, killing things off. A pretty impressive performance still from Heath Prentice, making 48 saves on the night. But the Rising Stars put themselves through, as did the Cardiff Canucks, their first ever season, and they make the playoffs, and they knock out the 3rd seed from 6th place. Haringey 2-0 up in the second period. Stuart Appleby and Luke Martin making it 2-0 before a goal from Giacomo Raffaelli late with 5 seconds to go in the second period, making it 2-1. Stephen Woodford made it 3-1 before goals from Arthur Lusso and Sam Davies scoring with 93 seconds to play, taking the game to overtime. Before, it was listed as a couple of different people, but eventually, 16 seconds in, it's credited as Lusso. He scores the overtime game-winning goal. The Huskies end the season without a trophy and out of the playoffs in the quarter-final stage, and the Cardiff Canucks move on to the semi-finals of the playoffs in their first ever season. Another 34 saves on the night from Harry Thomas. Dylan Phillips making 27 saves at the other end for the Huskies. And so what that means at the moment is that the Rising Stars, having knocked out the Mustangs, they get the honour of playing the Guildford Phoenix. They will meet at 6:15 p.m. this coming Saturday the 5th at the Ox Pens before heading to the Spectrum on Sunday. That's a 5:30 p.m. face-off in Guildford. And a pretty unenviable task for the Cardiff Canucks, but again, ice time availability means that they meet Saturday in Peterborough. I did say to Trevor Hendricks that all they had to do was keep it within single figures at this point. 6:30 p.m. on Saturday at Bretton before 6:30 p.m. on Sunday in Cardiff Bay. And the Canucks, well, they're either going to go out on their sword, or they're about to do another huge upset down in Cardiff Bay. Of course, as we know, everybody will then have all eyes for the weekend of the 12th and the 13th of April on the Steel City Showdown. Blimey, well, with all that news, it's later than I thought it was going to be, but we have done it. Every game from across the National Ice Hockey League postseason so far, all 5 divisions. I was about to say Leeds to Lee Valley, but Lee Valley aren't in it anymore because their season has ended. But we are done. We open the door. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything from across the world of ice hockey. Let's have a chat about it now for a little bit before we have to crack off and go home. I am home. But you know what I mean. There's plenty to talk about, of course. Alexander Ovechkin is now within 4 goals of the NHL goal-scoring record, having scored last night for the Capitals against the Boston Bruins. And like I say, Joe Beninati, the Capitals TV announcer, he can see the mountaintop from here. And with only 9 games to play, a lot of hockey left to be played, and you pretty much think that they're going to spend the next few weeks just setting him up. I can see as well, Jamie's mentioned, good to see Craig Lachlan back in commentary as well. He had to take some time out for heart surgery, so great that he is back in the commentary box as well. Of course, as we know, the Capitals have got this agreement now where if essentially if it's one of the nationally televised games that the Caps are in, you're going to have Joby and Locker kind of following around and kind of recording so that you get the audio as well. And we'll get John Walton, who's from a commentary perspective has been a massive impact on me. And so that's plenty of stuff going on. The other big news, of course, is that the Eisbären Berlin are moving on in the DEL playoffs. They have beaten the Straubing Tigers in the first round, and another goal for Liam Kirk last night as the Eisbären won Game 1 of their semi-final series against the Adler Mannheim. Now, for those of you not familiar with the DEL, Berlin and Mannheim in the DEL era of German hockey have been huge rivals. It is a series full of bite, full of venom. They do not like each other. Mannheim as well, coached by former Anaheim and Edmonton coach Dallas Eakins as well into that one. So plenty of good stuff there. But Liam Kirk on a pretty good goal scoring run as well. Ty Ronning, his teammate, I believe has scored in the last 20 or so. I think it's 20 games on a bounce. He's got at least a point in as well. So if I can just quickly see if I can find the playoff statistics for for Kirk. So in terms of Liam Kirk, so we've had the one game tonight actually in the DEL in the playoffs. Ingolstadt beating Köln by 7-0. Mannheim and Berlin go back to it this coming Friday. I think that's 6:45 our time and their time. Let's just quickly pull the. Just quickly sort that to the play-offs. Because what we want is not that. So at the moment, Kirk has 4 goals in 6 playoff games so far, which is pretty impressive. He is 2 behind the current goal scoring lead, which is shared between his teammate Ty Ronning of the Eisbären Berlin and Alexander Grenier of the Kölner Haie. Amazingly, for someone who scored that many goals, he's not in the not in the top plus minus is my understanding of that one, but we'll check that one out later. Andrew has chucked in the WNHL score, so of course we'll quickly run through the best of women's hockey across Britain from the last weekend or so. In the WNHL Elite League, the Whitley Bay Beacons going down at home to the Solihull Vixens. Solihull marching towards that WNHL Elite League title. They win by 7-1 up in the northeast. Whereas it was a bad weekend all round for the Beacons, then losing the following day down in Hull. The Kingston Diamonds beating the Beacons by a score of 4-3. In Division 1 North, a win in the Scottish Derby for the Caledonia Steel Queens. They beat the Solway Sharks ladies by 3-1. In South 1 on Saturday, a 4-2 win for the Swindon Topcats over the Chelmsford Cobras, and a win for their southwest rivals, the Bristol Huskies. They won by 2-0 away at the Firebees. On Sunday, Cardiff welcomed the MK Falcons down to South Wales, but it was the visitors who left with the points. A final score there of 3-1 in favour of Milton Keynes. Division 2 North on Saturday, Caledonia Steel Queens B team, a pretty heavy defeat at home for them. They lose by 9-0 at home against the Sheffield Shadows. The upcoming fixtures then. In Division 1 North this weekend on Sunday, the Nottingham Vipers versus the Kingston Diamonds. Division 1 South sees the Bristol Huskies and the Cardiff Comets meet at Cribbs Causeway on Saturday. And then on Sunday, the Huskies at home again. They take on the Firebees, fresh off of that win last weekend in Slough. 2A South on Saturday sees the Slough Sirens take on the Solent Amazons. And there's no Elite League fixtures for the next couple of weeks as the GB women prepare for the upcoming World Championships in Dumfries. Dave Pierce put in there that the Phantoms women team are currently looking for a head coach. So if you're watching and you fancy a spot of coaching some women's hockey, do contact the Peterborough Phantoms women. They will, of course, appreciate all the help that they can get on that one. Just very quickly, just going to double check, because we've had some news. Are we going to get any more news? Does anybody else feel that did an eligible player? Nothing immediately that I can see. But yes, what a crazy evening. British hockey, eh? Who needs a quiet life? All things considered. The other thing we'll touch on very quickly then, we will touch on the Elite League just for a moment. And of course, the Elite League, there's a bajillion podcasts that deal with the Elite League, and we don't normally deal with it a massive amount here on the What's Current stream, because our focus is the NIHL, and British hockey is bigger than the Elite League, and it's bigger than all of us. But should be said, we are at least heading into a pretty exciting weekend in the final weekend of the Elite League. Yours truly will be back in Guildford this weekend. I'll be commentating for Flames TV for Guildford versus Glasgow, which those two sides have been battling away for 6th place for a little while now. So that'll be interesting to keep my keep the bits and pieces up, keep the commentary rolling along. Of course, keeping tabs on everything that's happening happening in the NIHL playoffs too. But at the top of the Elite League, as well as at the bottom of the Elite League, it's getting pretty tight. Dundee and Manchester are in a firefight for that last and final playoff spot. But at the top end of the table, it's going to be pretty crazy. Nottingham in 3rd place and Belfast are who are in 1st place, are home and home this weekend. Sheffield are at home to Cardiff and then away to Coventry on Sunday. And there are a bajillion permutations where heading into the last weekend, one of 3 teams will be the Elite League. Will win the Elite League title this season. It is much harder for Nottingham because what Nottingham require to win the Elite League is for them to beat Belfast twice and for Sheffield to get no points at all. Mathematically, because the Steelers hold the tiebreak over the Panthers, 1 point will be enough to make sure that the Panthers cannot win the Elite League title from a Sheffield perspective. Sheffield also hold the tiebreaker over Belfast because league wins is the tie-breaking element here. And if Belfast and Sheffield finished level on points, the Sheffield Steelers will again win the Elite League Championship. Belfast have it nice and straightforward. Win. Better Sheffield's result over the weekend, and the Belfast Giants will take another Elite League title. Ultimately, crackers. Crazy that it's come down to that. We obviously came pretty close in the National Division before. It was eventually sewn up the weekend before the final weekend. But we are literally going down to the very wire in the Elite League. Almost as close as we went with, almost as close, if not closer, than South 1 in a lot of ways, which was won on the last day. South 2, given the run-in that Guildford had, was definitely not that close. But obviously it was a pretty tight thing at the end there for Slough to get over the line in South 1. And it's going to be pretty tight for whoever ends up winning the Elite League playoffs. Now for me, I have to keep a little bit of an eye on third because mathematically, still, Guildford could finish 5th. It is incredibly hard. They cannot finish lower than 6th. They now cannot be caught by the. They won't be caught by the Glasgow clan, bar a minor miracle, and I'm pretty certain Guildford have the tiebreak over them. So, theoretically, I'm looking at the prospect because I will be commentating on the home leg of Guildford's playoff tie on the 12th and the 13th. Now, I couldn't go to Sheffield anyway because it's 4 hours away. My wife was kind enough to let me go and commentate on the game an hour away that I can drive back to that night. So I'm looking at potentially down the barrel of Guildford playing either, more than likely, Nottingham, but potentially Sheffield, or potentially Belfast, or something goes completely catastrophically sideways, and they end up playing Cardiff home and home. So I don't even know what I'm doing on the 12th or the 13th, whether I'm commentating on the Saturday or the Sunday at the moment, which is pretty crazy. Either way, we are very much we're very much later than we usually would do. So we will say, last call for questions, comments, thoughts and feelings. Brad Marchand in a Panthers jersey. That was a weird sign, wasn't it? This was the other thing I was going to ask about. I don't really know. Would a Discord be of any interest to anyone? I'm not necessarily sure I would do it, but I thought I'd ask on here and gauge some interest whether anybody would want a BOTW Discord. It'd be pretty low key. It wouldn't be anything too hardcore. Just lots of hockey chat, I think, for the most part, is what we'd kind of go for. Nothing else I can immediately see. Like I say, we're a little bit later than we usually would do. Not me. No, I didn't think you probably would, Dave. You wouldn't strike me as a Discord person. But I figured I'd ask because I'm using Discord more and more for a few bits and pieces, and it's quite an interesting method of doing some stuff, kind of almost like forum-esque kind of thing. But if people aren't up for it, then it's not that big of a deal. Right, just given the time, I appreciate people may still be typing. We are gonna call it there. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Your number one source for all things related to the NIHL, and because I have to commentate on it now a little bit, the Elite League too. Follow me on my crazy journey through British hockey and our Banners on the Road series, the in-depth look at every game I go to. Of course, you've got last weekend for Guildford versus Nottingham, and you're going to get some great insight going forward. Of course, from Guildford versus Glasgow this weekend, then the Elite League playoffs. And then you'll get some stuff from me when it comes to Coventry as well. Plenty of stuff coming from Banners on the Wall, as well as our Hockey Story series. New pieces coming once the season has ended because there's just far too much to do. That'll be on the website as well. If you also enjoy my writing, do check out the programmes at the respective weekends, because there'll definitely be some bits and pieces in there. Might have hinted at what I'm doing for one of them in this show. But there's plenty of stuff, as well as the back catalogue of the old podcast and our free to download tabletop ice hockey game, Dice Hockey. 14 years worth of content to check out over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. We are on Facebook. We are on Facebook, Banners on the Wall, Twitter at BannersOTW. We are on Blue Sky as well if you search for that. But of course, the joy is you can go down there. There is a link in the YouTube description to our socials, as well to our virtual busking hat at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. We're never going behind the paywall, but it does cost to do bits and pieces. If you like what you get, if you enjoy the content that you get from BOTW, a couple of quid in the hat just helps us pay for some of the costs of some of the stuff we do. It all goes back into this. None of it goes anywhere else. So that'd be fantastic. If you can afford to do so, it'd be appreciated. If you don't want to chuck money our way, please like stuff, share stuff out, and, help keep that algorithm hamster happy, fat, and fed, as I like to see. But of course, as well, because we're here on YouTube, subscribe to the BOTW YouTube channel. There's plenty of videos of interviews with all kinds of people, the movers and shakers from around the world of ice hockey, especially as well from here in British ice hockey. And the great joy, of course, on the BOTW YouTube channel is that if you subscribe, you can hit notifications and you'll get told when we go live, because we are here, the British Hockey's first and only live show that covers all 5 divisions of the National Ice Hockey League structure. From Leeds to Lee Valley, we leave no game out, no stone unturned. The only place to get that every week is here, Wednesday nights throughout the season on the BOTW What's Current stream. 1 week of the pro season down. We have had controversy tonight during the show. We have had goals galore, upsets abound, and we are honing in even closer. We are one step closer to the Steel City showdown. Coventry is looming on the horizon, and the end of our season. And silly season. And then we'll be one step closer to it all beginning again. But let's finish this one first. There's lots of hockey still to be played, and you can join us on that journey as we keep finding out what happens. Also, go check out my Parma review, because it's funny and hockey is awesome, and people give you weird stuff. Be happy, and if you can't be happy, then wherever you are, please do everything you can to please be safe. As my friend Scotty Was would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe. And so long till next time. Enjoy your hockey where you find it. And send me a message. What game should I check out on Sunday when I'm back home after visiting my in-laws? There's not much left. Oh, Saturday, the Australian season starts. And there's New Zealand ice hockey to watch on YouTube. Don't think we'll escape it just yet. Have a good week, everybody. Enjoy your hockey where you find it this weekend. And join us back here next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. for the BOTW